Hi there, I'm Katie Atkiss, and I'm a Bioneer. I'm also on the board of the Blackwood Educational Land Institute, and I'm on the Executive Planning Committee for the Bioneers Conference. And I want to thank you all for being here today, especially the speakers. Thank you for sharing your stories and yourselves with us. And to all of you, thank you for coming and being a part and being this community. I've been so buzzed about this for so long because we had such a wonderful experience last year. So I'm glad you're here. I'm gonna try to keep this really brief because I'm told the more I talk, the less time our next speaker, Dr. Bill Kerley, has to talk. And he's much more interesting than I am. But I am honored to introduce him. He is one of my spiritual teachers. And I feel like saying his name should be introduction enough because of the meaning that it's come to carry for me and the impact that hearing his weekly talks, which he calls Ordinary Life, has had on my life. So I realize you guys haven't had that experience, so I do have to say a little bit more about him. Bill Kerley is a Methodist minister, and you're gonna have to, I'm doing my best piecing it together from what I've gathered from the talk, so if I misrepresent, my apologies. He's also a practicing Buddhist. Excuse me? He's also a practicing Buddhist. The reason, as part of one of the biggest growing religions in the United States, the nuns, or the spiritual but not religious, the reason that I go to church every Sunday to hear Dr. Kerley speak, the reason his message really resonates with me is he doesn't talk about a transactional religion. There's no, you go to Sunday and then you can go about your week as usual because you've done your job. It's really transformation is what he talks about. And he talks about the importance of having a daily spiritual practice to develop compassion and love for yourself so you can share it with everyone else in the world. And everyone, no exceptions, is something that's always emphasized. So Bill also teaches at the University of Houston Law School. And he's also a marriage and family therapist and president of the Houston chapter of the National Speakers Association and received in Philadelphia the organization's Member of the Year Award. And he's married to Dr. Sherry Beeman, who's also here today. And they have 2 grandchildren, 2 cats, and 1 completely spoiled standard poodle. Also in 2008, there was an endowment that was established in his honor, the Kerley Endowment for Spiritual Advancement and Understanding. And in his talk today, he hopes to contribute to that goal. So without further delay, I introduce Dr. Bill Kerley.
Okay, just to get started and also to illustrate a little bit about what I want to talk about, let me ask you to silence your cell phone. And for those of you, this will tell you about a generational divide, right here, because this is the size of the actual very first cell phone that I own, right? And some of you are not aware of that. And we have made such technological advances that now I am actually running this presentation today from my iPhone that is up here on this podium. I appreciate being invited to speak here today. I do not know why I have been invited to speak. I know nothing about global warming or what to do about it. I'm in as much a quandary about the current economic system as anybody. I don't know how to fix the healthcare system. I don't know what to do about the unrest and various crises in the Middle East. Indeed, I know so little about so many of these matters that it is a wonder I have not been elected to Congress. You know that a group of antelopes is called a herd. A group of ants is a colony. A group of fish is a school. A group of bees is called either a swarm or a cluster. A group of chickens is called a flock. And a group of baboons is called a congress. Now that ought to explain something right there. So, I did, however, put a political sign in my yard So let's get on with it. I am a very big reader, and when you consult with me about spiritual direction or a psychotherapy matter, one of the things that they're going to hear in almost every session is a book recommendation. I think that books are very important, and reading is very important. And I have just finished reading a book that has received about as many rave reviews as any book I have read recently. It is on almost every bookseller's top 10 book list, and the last time I checked it had 288 reviews on Amazon. The book is called Super Sad True Love Story. And I want you to be aware, if you plan to read it, that it is X-rated. Now that guarantees that most people will go and buy it. It's by Gary Stingart, and the novel is what might be called a dystopian novel. The word dystopian means the opposite of utopian. And it depicts the United States at a time in the future where the country has gone bankrupt and is owned by China. The Chinese plan to divide the country into smaller parts and sell them off to other countries that have outdone the United States in financial stability. The main character of the novel is a narrator named Lenny Abramoff, and he is of Russian descent from a Jewish immigrant family that settled in New York City. And he has achieved some degree of success by selling immortality to upper echelon of the income bracket, and his offices are located in an abandoned synagogue in New York City, which I think is a very interesting metaphor. Everybody communicates by devices that are hung around their necks that are called apparata. And these apparata are used to communicate to people around you your attractiveness, your intellect, your social ability, your economic status. There are, instead of light poles or electricity poles in the streets, there are poles that allow everybody, as you pass the pole, to know your financial rating. This helps the high-income people know who to avoid. Books are virtually a thing of the past, and a person who reads books is considered a social deviant. As I said, the United States is bankrupt. It is owned by China. The Chinese have come to take over. There is little or no competition, as most businesses have merged into one. There is one airline, United Continental Delta American. U.S. currency is worthless and is pegged to other currencies, currently to the Chinese. Other businesses are held by huge holding companies, such as Land O'Lakes GM Ford. There is no privacy. There is no respect for boundaries. Crudity is the order of the day. The poor are the dispossessed because the rich and powerful eliminate them as being a hindrance to progress and growth, and yes, even survival. Selling out your own best friend in order to survive is the order of the day. Capitalism is a thing of the past. Now, if one were to evaluate a book by its ability to convince the reader of the possibility of its truth, I can see why this book received such a high award. I left each period of reading feeling as in the proverbial car crash metaphor, unable to take my eyes off of it and yet horrified at the same time, because it is not unimaginable to see such a future for this country or for our cherished institutions. Now, I know it is a ploy for some spiritual teachers to set up straw men and then knock them down. Things will be painted as bleak as they can be, and then at the last moment, the masked horse rider in the heroic Western movie is trotted in with a solution to save the day. And yes, I think it is helpful to remember that in times like these in which we currently live, there have always been times like these. I am not unmindful of the incredible benefits most of us receive as a result of living in this country. And I am aware that I personally would not be alive today had I not been living where I could receive the benefits of perhaps one of the best medical centers in the world. I am also aware that even in the field of medicine, this country lags very far behind many other countries. I ran across a quote by Irving Fisher, who is the famed Yale economist, who said, "At the present moment, the United States has the unenviable distinction of being the only great industrial nation without compulsory health insurance." He made that statement in 1916. And though our founding documents proclaim the importance of the pursuit of happiness, we are in fact rated as the 12th happiest country in the world. Denmark comes in first. Only 50% of the residents of this country say that they are thriving. The United States spends more of its gross national product on health care than any other country in the world, and yet the World Health Organization ranks us 19th in physical well-being of 191 countries. Globally, we live in a world where 50% of the world's population lives on less than $2 a day, 20% live on less than $1 a day, and Sojourners, which is the Christian social action magazine, has produced a movie on poverty. Poverty in America is not what many people think. And I intend to post the text of this talk on my own website so that you can go and get a link to the Sojourners movie and watch it for yourself. When a country spends more on its prisons than it does on educating its young people, you know that something is wrong. We are number one of all the countries in the world with the number of people in prison, over 2 million. That's more than China. Now, I know that you have heard statistics like this before, but I bring them up because we need groups of people such as yourselves to remember that if our current behavior is projected into the world, into the future, one could say that in both the world and at home, we are our own worst enemy. And why is that, and what can we do to stop that? And that's part of what I want this talk to be about. There's a great cartoon in the paper not long ago. And the answer is yes. We are flirting with death. Stephen Hawking said, "We have only to look at ourselves to see how intelligent life might develop into something we wouldn't want to meet." Now, this is so puzzling because American people pride themselves on being so smart. At one time, that might have been the case, but as a recent article in the Scientific American reported, there was a recent edition of the Scientific American in an article written by Stephen Otto bemoaning the fact that the United States is slipping off its foundation of science. At one time, says the author, the leaders of the government, he was talking about Jefferson and Franklin, for example, favored knowledge that was gained by systematic study over the assertions of ideology. And the article goes on to claim that the country is being swept by science denialism. More and more people, especially in places of leadership, are vocal in their denial of evolution, human-induced climate change, even the fact that rape can lead to pregnancy. There is an emphasis on ideological conformity, regardless of what the facts say. And one wit, trying to make the point, was asked if he believed in global warming, and he said no. But if there is such a thing, it's caused by illegal immigration and Obamacare. Now, why is this? Why do we behave in ways that are not in our best interest? And that's what I want this talk to be about today, and it's what my life's work has been about since I've been an adolescent. The short answer about why we don't behave in our best interest is that as a people and as a culture, we are unconscious and we are immature. I'm going to talk briefly about each of those and then suggest some ways that we might become more conscious and grow up. I frequently remind people that we are like icebergs. This part of us right here is above the surface of the water. This down here we don't know. And my definition, the ego is this little tippy top thing up here. And I'll talk about the ego more in a moment, but the unconscious frequently makes tremendous decisions for us that we are not aware of, and those decisions are very frequently not in our best interest. One of my favorite examples of this unconscious destructive behavior is that involving former President Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. If we had walked into the Oval Office when they were engaged in the behavior that derailed them and had asked them, what in God's name are you two people thinking? The honest answer would have been, we're not. Something had reached up, right? Something had reached up from the unconscious and captured them, which is my word for this, and drugged them into a darkness and destructiveness that they are still paying for. We can easily get captured by the unconscious. It happens to individuals, and it happens as cultures. Now, for most of psychology's young life, the emphasis has been on what we might refer to as ego development. Ego developmental theories, and most of you are aware of them, starting with the theories of Erik Erikson and Owen. They all fit more or less the same model where we have 8 ages, as Erikson called them, of man or woman: early childhood, late childhood, early adolescence, late adolescence, early adulthood, late adulthood, early elderhood, and late elderhood. And it was assumed that you got born and you kind of moved through each of these ages of development. Now, 2 of these ego developmental stages are unavoidable. Early childhood, we all get born, and late elderhood, we all get to die. The others are rather optional. Okay. So for much of psychology's history, the emphasis has been on what we call egocentric forms of development. And recently, in the last 30, 40 years, there's been a shift among some spiritual teachers and some psychologists to work on more self-centered development. The ego is different from the self. The ego is the spacesuit we use to get around on this planet. The self is who we really are. Okay? In the early days of psychoanalysis, when only the very wealthy could afford analysis, people would say, why do you go to therapy or analysis 4 or 5 days a week? What are you doing? And the answer that patients were taught to say is, well, we're working on reducing the size of my ego. Okay? That's why psychologists and psychiatrists are called shrinks. We're reducing the size of the ego. There's been very little emphasis until just recently, I mean literally recently in the long history of time, on the effects of love and compassion for human development and growth. And of course, as humans go, so goes the society. I remember where I was sitting in my cubicle in graduate school when I found a quote by Carl Jung that has been the guiding principle of my work ever since. Jung said, and he said this in many different places, so it shows up different ways. He said, among all my patients in the second half of life, that is to say above the age of 35, there has not been one whose problem in the last resort was not that of finding a religious outlook on life. It is safe to say that every one of them fell ill. And this is true of a society as well, because he or she had lost what the living religions of every age have given to their followers, and none of them has been really healed who did not regain his or her religious outlook. This, of course, has nothing whatever to do with a particular creed or membership of a church. So what does it have to do with? And how can we experience more wholeness in the world that seeks to fragment us? And I would say that we have to learn to love, that we have to learn how to experience and express compassion, and that we absolutely have to be committed to justice for all people if we are going to save us. Now, I love gadgets and toys and technology as well as anybody here. Technology is wonderful. As I said, it has saved my life, but it is the ultimate barrier to being in the moment. And we contribute to that by the way we relate to our devices. Just a few, because a picture can say more than a person can. We bring you a connection to the modern world. Next month we'll be back with antidepressants. Must you check your messages while we are having dinner? And this one, to show you how early it starts, is okay. So I want to introduce you to two resources that you need. And as I said, I will put these and the PDF of these slides on my own website. We met several years ago, a man named Bill Plotkin. How many of you know of him? Okay, more of you need to know of Bill Plotkin. This wonderful book on soulcraft and his latest book on nature and the human soul. He's absolutely amazing. And ever since I met him, he has been influential in my work. Indeed, the title of this talk comes from him. Now, the good news is that there are people like him and you in the world contributing to a better community to positively affect our lives. Here's the bad news. According to Bill Plotkin's research, 80% of the adult population of our country is stuck in late adolescence. And if you want credible scientific evidence of this, just watch primetime commercial television. When we first heard Plotkin, the early Republican presidential debates were being held on television, and he said, watch them. They are nothing more than cafeteria high school food fights. They're not discussions. So across the years, I think three things have affected my work, which I would raise your awareness of, that no amount of my clinical training prepared me to deal with. One has to do with the pace at which we live, and I could spend the rest of the day talking about that. We're doing more and more and more, cramming more into less time and not taking time to be aware and to grow up, which is what we need to do. The second thing that has impressed me is the amount of anger and resentment people have about what they do to make a living. You may or may not be aware of the fact that the majority of heart attacks that occur in this country happen between 8 and 10 o'clock on Monday morning. We can make an association with our work that affects our well-being. And the third has to do with the amount and degree of violence that exists in the American family. That is, in the family statistically is understandable because that's where we spend most of our time, but that there is so much of it. It is just absolutely appalling. So, our job is to bring all of who we are to all of what the world is. And that requires knowing who we are, genuinely and truly, and being sensitively aware of where we live. And relating to the world in a way that does not assume that it is an endless resource or garbage dump for our well-being. So, that's our job. That's the way we experience wholeness in a fragmented world. And to that end, I want to close with a blessing that comes from the Franciscan tradition. My primary spiritual teacher is a Franciscan friar, and he's the one that got me to Bill Plotkin. But this is the blessing. May God bless you with this comfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that you may live deep within your heart. May God bless you with anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people, so that you may work for justice, freedom, and peace. And may God bless you with tears to shed for those who suffer from pain, rejection, starvation, and war, so that you may reach out your hand to comfort them and to turn their pain into joy. And may God bless you with enough foolishness to believe that you can make a difference in this world, so that you can do what others claim cannot be done. Thank you.